So there was a lot that we wanted to share during the planetary crisis, and we couldn't squeeze everything in there. So that's why we added on a few extra optional sessions. And so this morning we've got about half an hour to share with you a little bit about a case study, really, using Jamyang as a case study to show, to introduce the Sanctuary Project as it pertains to the conversation that we've been having in the last couple of days, because this could, provide insight, inspiration, a platform for further discussions, because as we've heard yesterday, it's amazing how many centers are doing many, many things, their own things. So today we're just sharing, our own case study, but likewise, we're very aware there's many other wonderful things happening across the region. So the Sanctuary Project came about as we were embarking on a kind of a strategic vision for Jamyang, especially as we are working towards our 50th anniversary. So in 2028, I'm looking at Venerable Wangyal, I think it's 2028. Jamyang is going to be celebrating its 50th anniversary. And these are always good touch points where, leverage points where you can reflect of, okay, we are closing the first 50 years of our history, but what do we want the next 50 years to be for the community, and what kind of world are we in, and how do we evolve? And so as part of that, we were in dialogue with different architects who asked us this provocative yet so simple question of, well, how is the building going to embody and reflect that strategic vision that we have? And so the Sanctuary Project was born out of that. So even though we're talking about, the walls of the building, you'll see it's actually much more than that, because we're talking about themes of equality, diversity, environmental care, people care, economic sustainability. It's a 360 vision of an exploration of sustainability. So Paul, who was operation manager, is now spearheading the Sanctuary Project, together with Dave, who's our technical advisor. And so Dave is an engineer, and so he's helping us interface, because there's a lot of technical details that go with that, and especially delving in some of the more technical aspects of sustainability. So Paul and Dave will share a little bit about how that project is unfolding for us.
Thank you, Venerable. Okay, so as I was preparing for this talk today, and I was looking through the slides of our presentation, I was also at the same time reflecting on all of the work that's been done over the past 2 days and the information that we've been provided with. And one of the questions that came up for me is, does a building project fit in with the work that we've been doing around the climate crisis? It's a really important question to ask. And to put this in some context for you, the construction industry globally is responsible for 38% of carbon emissions. And to contextualize that, the aviation industry is 2.1%. So why is it, how do we find ourselves in this position where the construction industry contributes so much? And it links back to this idea of a lack of contentment, wanting more. In the UK, 55,000 buildings a year are demolished, and then they're rebuilt, or the space is repurposed. The average lifespan of a building that's commercial or for public use is just 40 years. It's quite a shocking number. The building that you are sat in right now is 155 years old. So the Sanctuary Project supports that. It wants to make the building usable for another 155 years. It adds longevity. It cares for the building. It cares for the people. It cares for the local community. And we're not talking about a building project. We're talking about a really considered restoration project, something that helps us to achieve our strategic goals, something that can be considered within a sustainable framework of non-harm. And so I think that captures kind of what the Sanctuary Project is about, the essence of that. So with the Sanctuary Project, it gave us the opportunity to reflect on taking a step towards embodying the fundamental principles of ecology and sustainability and non-harm. And the key modulating factor here is within our spiritual community. So when we sit in the Gompa every morning and set a motivation of non-harm, is it authentic when we're burning gas to keep ourselves warm? Is it authentic when we were consuming dairy in the kitchen? Is it authentic when we make offerings of cut flowers wrapped in plastic that have been flown around the world? You know, it's these wider questions of embodying our spiritual practice within the physical space. And the Sanctuary Project is giving us a moment to pause and to really put this into practice. So the architectural project really for us is based around our aspirations for Jamyang, its community, the local community. So caring for our team is really an important part of that. We realize that as our global organization is made up of individual centers, so too individual centers are made up of individuals. So providing space within the building that cares for the mental well-being. Buildings impact our mental state, our physical experience of the space we're in, and that's vital, you know, if we're to be a spiritual home and welcome people in, that the people who live here and contribute to its successes are well cared for. It also allows us to increase and expand our education offering, and it's come up from several delegates here that the climate crisis is, you know, it's from the mind, it's from the afflictive states, wanting more attachment, desire. So if we're able to support our expanding Dharma education through the Sanctuary Project, you know, the benefits are immeasurable. It allows us to really embrace the practices of non-harm and green transformation. So this is in recognition of a question that a community member asked me a little while ago, you know, about the aspects of this project. And the Sanctuary Project allows us to look at what would need doing in the building, the ongoing schedule of maintenance, the cost, the expense, the resource. If they're taken together as individual aspects, do we stop and look at the ecological impact? The answer generally is no. Whereas if we group everything together that the building needs, that the community needs, we can create that framework. We can create, as Venerable Drama said, this case study, this opportunity to measure our successes, to see where we're at, to see where we would like to be, and to be able to achieve those aims. The Sanctuary Project also allows us to help to realize our equality, diversity, and inclusivity aims, reaching out to the local community. It's not by chance that Jamyang is here in one of the most deprived urban areas of London. And that leads on to enlivening local community engagement as well, really being a welcoming space and making a difference for people across London, the UK, and as we're online around the world. We're also looking at the challenges of our present day and the challenges of the forthcoming years. So, we experience the effects of the climate emergency now. When it rains now here in London, the Victorian guttering on our building isn't built to the capacity at which we now see the volume of rain. It overflows, it floods, the building suffers from damp because of that. We suffer from overheating in the summer because of the heat waves, the lack of ventilation, the building materials that this building is made from, really impacts Jamyang as a whole. And ongoing insulation issues that we see in the winter as well. It's drafty, cold, not well insulated. So this is just a few of the issues that this project is allowing us to address. And it also is giving us the space to embody the support for the strategic aims of Jamyang, and by providing a physical base, we're able to then really also support the 5 pillars of service. So I think that's it from me. I'll hand you over to Dave, who's going to talk about our measures and our framework. Okay.
All right, great. Thank you. Wow, this is kind of new for me. So what is sustainability is this question. There's a lot of different frameworks, but basically, sustainable is a very fuzzy word and it doesn't really mean much. So we're trying to make it more meaningful and measurable and have targets and things. So there's a lot of different frameworks we're working with. So RIBA is the Royal Institute of British Architects, who they have there's like an 8-step design and construction process for new and renovated buildings, which our architects follow and seems pretty standard in the UK. So within RIBA, this Royal Institute of British Architects, they have like this program for sustainability. They have a sustainable outcomes guide. And so within that, they're kind of starting, so the UN has sustainable development goals. And so RIBA starts with that, and then they think about, well, how can, buildings and address some of these. And so they've come up with these different category outcomes, they're calling them, the sustainable outcomes. I could read them all, but I won't. So good health and well-being, and it gets into like net zero energy, net zero carbon, then transportation, sustainable communities, and things like that. So we can look a little more detail in the next slide. But basically, you can go to the next. We come up with these 8 different outcomes. So I can go across really quick. So you got net zero operational carbon, net zero embodied carbon, sustainable water, sustainable connectivity and transport, sustainable land use and ecology, good health and well-being, sustainable communities and social values, and sustainable life cycle cost. And kind of when we got started on this, it all started with being net zero, which could be net zero carbon, net zero energy. And we were pretty narrow on that. But then as you see, and you look at, it's a lot bigger than that. There's a lot more different categories. So we're kind of just getting started at addressing these, or at least looking, what we want to take on and what we can't take on, and what's applicable and what's not applicable. And we've done pretty good, like this first one, net zero operational carbon. We've, at least, in the design, we're looking at, increasing fabric improvements, they call it. So adding insulation, replacing the windows with double pane windows. These windows are just terrible. Like, some of them you can stick your finger through, you can stick your finger through, there's so much of a gap. So that, and then, we're looking at having heat pumps to replace the boilers, so we'd be off fossil fuels. Of course, where does electricity come from is another question. Potentially solar panels on the roof to address some of that. So we've got a good start on this, but we're just kind of at the very beginning of some of these other ones. Like for water, we haven't talked too much about sustainable water cycles, but you can get in, I mean, there's efficient, so any one of these categories, you can just dig really deep. And so these are different principles. I know you can't read them, and I can't really read them, but it can get into detail, so you can like look at each one of these, and some of these won't be applicable to us, and some will. But it gets into things like rainwater collection and gray water use, and even black water treatment, which is black water is like from toilets, and gray water is more like showers and washing machines. So like basically, though, we're just getting started on this process, and yeah, we'll see. Hopefully, we'll do well with it. I think that's all I got.
So maybe a little bit more concretely, we can share, okay, specifically what do we mean by this project. But I think what's really helpful, and listening to Dave and Paul present this, it really shows you like using the existing, their amazing existing frameworks that already exist to help you think through different components of sustainability. And so we're just using these different frameworks, and they've been really, really helpful to give us a structure within which we have discussions. What about this? Are we thinking about this? Are we thinking about that? And so it's definitely, and of course, in partner with our architects, but everyone looks at a project through its own individual technical or professional lens, whereas, as a team using these frameworks, it helps us, have different conversations. So concretely within the buildings, and it's very interesting because, it's not easy. You're talking about a project that's about £3.5 million. I mean, it's daunting. It's really a big endeavor for an organization our size. And yet, as we were thinking about the different components of it, and together with the trustees really thinking through with this kind of strategic objectives that we have, is it an option not to move forward with this project? So I'll give you one example. One of the major items in the project is to install a lift. It's such a simple thing. And of course, a lot of historically listed buildings have this issue, right? Because many of them don't have a lift. But if you think through the consequences of it, it's not small, because it means that you've got volunteer resident accommodation that are not accessible for people who have mobility issues. And likewise with staff who live on site, or teachers that come and live or visit. Are we comfortable with that, having that kind of exclusion? Thinking about people who are aging, and they require a lot of courage, because the rational mind is really, that's really, daunting. So the plans it would be at the back of the temple. We would create a lift, and yet it's incredibly inspiring to put those values at the forefront and look back at the building. Okay, how does the building evolve if we really have those values at the core and at the forefront? So I'll give one more maybe example around economic sustainability and the aspect of people care we talked about. So those of you who've been staying on site in the Lotus guest house have seen downstairs, and we've got a number of resident volunteers in this room who stay in cells. And the cells, are okay if you're staying for a short while, but if you're staying for an extended period of time, that's a sacrifice. You're living in a room that has little ventilation, little light, and are we as an organization comfortable with that? And yet changing it is not an easy thing, and it really requires courage. So the idea is to transform the entire cell block into a guest house. It would double the size of the guest house, which means it makes the organization more financially sustainable, so we can take better care of our people, but our resident volunteer would move in another part of the building. So those are some of the examples of the changes that that the building would go through. Or we've got a large basement downstairs that's been completely, underutilized. It's been utilized to store boxes, but underutilized. And our education and community activities are flourishing. So we would transform the basement, which would be accessible with a lift, into an education and community space. And so that we could welcome more people and lean into the interest that is being generated by this community. So yeah, those are some of the examples of the tough choices that we're facing with this project.
And just to say, we'll share this presentation with everyone here. So there's links for resources, further reading, and also a link to the Sanctuary Project website, where all of the architectural drawings and everything that we've talked about today, plus everything that we haven't, is on there. So please do visit the website and take a look. So success and sustainability, what does that look like for us? So building on what Dave was talking about with the frameworks, it's really important for us to begin this project with sustainability and non-harm in mind. So surveying the building, what's our energy consumption look like now? How do we manage our water waste now? What does the ventilation and air escapage look like now? How well insulated are we? So we create metrics, a starting point for us to be able to measure the building and see where we are. From there, we can, within the framework of a Victorian building, establish where we would like to be, what is realistic for us, and also to have the conversation around which metrics aren't suitable, you know, in an urban area with a building like ours. What are we able to say, yes, we would like to focus our attention on these, our resources on these, and others where we find they simply can't align with our project. As Venerable Drolma said, we're working with a team of experts, so it's relying on our mechanical and engineering teams, our architects, who are very used to working with these frameworks and delivering projects with sustainability at their heart. We'll also be building a sustainability subgroup for the Sanctuary project, and those conversations are happening now and taking shape now. So if anyone is interested in being involved in that, please do reach out to myself or Venerable Drolma. And the final point maybe is just to say that we're not the first organization to be doing this, which I find really inspiring, that we are making a concerted effort to look outside of ourselves, beyond the walls of our center, beyond the framework of our organization, and we're reaching out, and that looks like speaking to other faith organizations who also have historically listed buildings. How have they managed their buildings and worked on projects similar to ours? It's reaching out to our local council, it's politicians, it's interested community members, local groups. The list goes on and on and on. So really, I think this project is going to ripple outwards in many ways, but it's wonderful because we can welcome so many people in to take part as well.
I remember, because we'd been working and investing into this project quite a bit, and I think we were working for about a year and a half in, and reached a stage in the project where we either had to move forward and invest quite a bit more, or, so there was, that was September last year, and it was a whole day where all the trustees came together, and we had an entire day with the project team, and we laid out how each component of the project, how they supported different aspects of the strategic plan. And so the whole day was really pushing. And as you can imagine, for trustees, you know, this is probably the biggest decision they had to make as trustees in their tenureship as trustees. And so you really, really think through, like, is this really necessary? Because it's easy to get, you know, you get carried by the momentum of inspiration and, you know, this and that, but to really stop and pause and reflect fully, do we really want to do that? So we went through an entire day of challenging ourselves of, is this really necessary? And what are the consequences of not doing each of these particular things? And it was a very powerful day. And basically the outcome was the cost of not doing these different things is going to be greater than doing them. And so that's what helped us. We had to go through that you know, discussion back and forth of what's the cost of not doing. One of the wonderful things with these projects, and again, you know, this is just one example, but it really brings you out of your shell, because the only way you can do something like that is if you work with others, and if you bring others, if you partner, if you inspire others, so already it's happening. And so discussion with the local council and meeting other organizations, like the only way you're going to get this done is if you start raising your profile in the local community and start working with others. And so there's tremendous benefits in doing that. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Dave, and thank you all for coming and listening and being here and sharing with us. Yeah, thank you.